Hi, my name is Valerie Varan. I'm a licensed professional counselor, a holistic life coach, a quantum psychology pioneer, and author of the book Living in a Quantum Reality, using quantum physics and psychology to embrace your higher consciousness. With me today is Sucandra, and she's a co-founder of CHI. And Sucandra, welcome. I'm so glad we're going to have our conversation today.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Thank you. Why don't you go ahead and tell people a little bit about the CHI group that you're with and why you co-founded it?
Thank you, Valerie. Chung Huong Institute, or CHI, is a nonprofit 501c3, the only one that I know fully run by Buddhist nuns, including me. And what we do is we bridge the three major Buddhist traditions. So we have Theravada, Mahayana, and Tibetan tradition with science, specifically neuroscience and psychology. And what we want to do is help people have greater sense of mental well-being, happiness, less suffering in the world, and less division between traditions, less division between views, spiritual views, the sciences. We wish to bring a global dialogue between scientists, between practitioners, and create a space for people to truly, truly be themselves, to truly be free in who they are, not fed by, not brainwashed by the subliminal messages we receive day in, day out, moment by moment, but see what's true and what's real and what's truer than that.
That is beautiful, Sucandra, right? Getting really, really deeply into the self and what is unified across all traditions, really, right? Getting to the heart of things. That's beautiful. So what we're really talking about today is transpersonal psychology. And for those people who may not really know what transpersonal is, maybe you can go ahead and describe it.
Sure. So transpersonal, first of all, it's really important to understand that there's no set definition that's agreed upon. So the definition I will provide is my own understanding. Transpersonal psychology is really spiritual psychology. So looking into the human being beyond the ego self, beyond the ego structures of the being, right? And what lies within the mind. That's probably the most simple definition.
Oh, and that's beautiful because in Western psychology, it's really an atheist perspective, isn't it? And so what happens is if someone has a spiritual experience, or quite frankly, if someone even has a spiritual belief of some kind, Western psychology conventionally has kind of viewed that as a weakness of mind. And a lot of times these experiences are either called delusions or hallucinations. And so it is interesting that another wave had to come around called transpersonal psychology to help people who were having spiritual experiences be able to have a place within psychology. I'd really love to hear when you think of transpersonal experiences, what does that encompass for you? What have you seen out there in the field?
Yeah. So, what I have seen out there in the field, or what I have experienced within myself, or what I think myself, which,
Yes, a little bit of all of that. I love that.
okay. So, what I see common is that people think transpersonal psychology or transpersonal even practices are just psychedelics, but I do not agree with that perspective. So we see psychedelic therapies on the rise, MAPS is all over the place, right? Um, and everyone wants to get in on psychedelic research within that kind of population. Why I think that has a lot of danger is because I don't see it any different than the pharmaceutical industry, right? When antidepressants came around, everyone's very happy because they think that it's going to help them. Then later, what we find is it causes lack of clarity in the mind. Now, physical symptoms, weight gain, lethargy, depression that has just been dulled so extremely, or one doesn't even experience feelings. Now I'm generalizing again, right? It doesn't mean that everyone, it's like not good for everyone. Not saying antidepressants are bad, not saying that psychedelics are not going to help everyone. There's a place for that.
But
Right?
I so agree with you, right? Because in a way, psychedelics were just replacing, like you said, the regular pharmaceutical medication, and it just makes people think and believe that they need whether it's the medication or whether it's the psychedelics, it just makes people believe that they need that to experience something beyond. So yes, continue. I love this.
Yeah, I think that if we look at the origination of psychedelics now, if we look at like the Native American tribes and cultures, traditions, let's take ayahuasca, for example, in this case. I remember speaking with one shaman in the past of the Navajo tradition, and he said to me that the psychedelics, specifically in this case ayahuasca, he said, is only meant to be taken one time in a person's life, only for serious, serious sickness. I don't believe that all of our society has a serious sickness that they need to take ayahuasca every week, every month. You know?
It's beautiful to even hear that that's what the shaman was saying. And like you said, that's not what's happening today.
Yeah. So I think this is where we have kind of a convoluted view of transpersonal. And I think that this is where we have an opportunity, rather than falling into another addiction, which I know many people listening may argue that, no, it's not addicted. I can stop it. I'm not addicted. I can stop at any time. Well, then why don't you stop for a year and see what happens? Practice, right? Some people argue that psychedelics are a gateway into really deep states of meditation. I would argue against that. I think that if one really wants to try to see what's out there, in quotes, right? Okay, you want to try one time. Done. Just see for a moment, but know that maybe that's an illusion in itself. Maybe that's actually deluding you much more than you can even imagine. Maybe it's just giving you a euphoric high for a moment and you think it's reality. But there's something deeper than that. And it's not a magic pill to discover that deeper place, right? There's no such thing as instant noodles for reality, right?
I I love that. And like you said, I mean, even the shaman said if someone's really, really sick, maybe they have this one experience. So we're not saying out there to the viewers that it's never appropriate and that no one should ever, take it. What we're saying is the way it's being promoted is in a way replacing what you're truly trying to find through your seeking. And so we're just advocating against over reliance on the use of psychedelics, and like you said, avoidance. Really, it's avoidance of what we truly are meant to get to, the end goal, right? So I would love for you to expand upon the alternative, right? For that's psychedelics, but then describe to people the world we really want them to experience and the ways to get there.
Sure. So I think, first of all, it's important to look at what are my priorities, my intentions, right? If one wants to take a psychedelic, for example, why? Okay, I want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. Okay, is deluding my mind going to make me suffer less? Probably not, because the delusion ends and then I have to face whatever is on the other side of that at some point. But yet, because when we delude ourselves, we don't really fully see reality, right? We have the rose-colored glasses, or we have glasses with a bunch of fingerprints on it. We cannot see reality. For me, I have noticed that through the practice of meditation, really getting to know my own mind, then everything is much easier. At first, when I started meditating, I felt like, oh, my mind is so crazy, right? Like it's just wandering all over the place. And it's just telling me so many stories. And wow, I have been believing those stories, right? So common stories like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'll never be enough, right? We hear these day in, day out, especially like in coaching, especially in therapy, counseling, you name it, right? And that's actually That's why most people do psychedelics, because they want to have confidence, right? Confidence to overcome a trauma, confidence to overcome something. But how can we overcome if we are not able to face it, right? If we're not able to see clearly, here's the dirt on my skin. Can I actually clean it off? Not let me put some foundation, right? Foundation or cover up. What is it called now?
Yes, foundation.
Yes. So we don't need to do that. It's okay.
Yes,
So
that's beautiful.
yeah, for me, I think the practice of meditation, sure, it takes longer. But I think that, again, instant pills will yield instant side effects that are going to be long lasting.
So this brings up an interesting train of thought about the various kinds of meditation out there and the types of purposes they're for, right? So you were bringing up like people want to seek happiness, or maybe they want to seek calm, or maybe they are like, wow, I want to focus my attention, or like you said, these thoughts are all over the place. How do I get some clarity and stillness? On the other hand, so many people are really wanting, maybe they're questioning, is there anything beyond this world? Is there something like a spiritual reality? So there can be various goals around meditation. So I would love to hear your thoughts around that.
I think the first step is to calm the mind. First, we have to see, we know science has proven already. We have millions and millions, if not billions of thoughts a moment. Now, if we're going to follow each one of those thoughts, goodness, we're going to create so much suffering for ourselves and those around us, right? Even we couldn't have this interview if we both followed our thoughts. We would just be jumping and jumping and jumping and screaming at each other some ideas that make no sense. There's no coherent reality there, right?
Right.
So I think first, we call shamatha meditation or calm abiding, right? One sits down, can either close the eyes or soften the gaze, have an upright posture, and just have an object of focus. So traditionally in Buddhist meditation, we focus at the space right below the nostrils on the breath, right? And we can feel that. Like if we put our hand in front of our nose and we exhale and we feel it's so warm, right? And so we focus. What does that feeling of inhale and exhale feel like? Right? Until the mind comes. When the mind comes, the body comes. Now, sometimes what ends up happening is we feel so anxious, or we've gone through so many experiences that even closing the eyes and focusing on the breath can bring about certain levels of traumatic experiences, especially those with PTSD. This may be very difficult. So, for that, an image, something one really, really appreciates, respects, or loves, right? If someone is Buddhist, we would say, put a picture of the Buddha, look in the center. So, and just keep your eyes there. If someone is like, I don't like any kind of spiritual anything, I just want to calm my mind. Do you like dogs? Put a dog there, look at the nose, right? That's it. Put something you love, appreciate, respect, or something that makes you happy there. Sometimes even that doesn't work. And I had one student at the university who, she said the only thing that worked for her is noise. So she created something called a happy song. And she would sing this happy song, and that would be her meditation to calm her mind. So here,
created her own chant.
Yes, exactly. A chant or a mantra, right? I want to be happy. So maybe my mantra is, may I be happy. And I say that over and over and over again. And, they say fake it till you make it. Even I cannot find that happiness now. But maybe as I keep saying it, my mind believes that there will be happiness. And we see again, now let's back up to science. When one has even a soft smile on their face, when they're upset, we can trick the mind that we're no longer upset very quickly. And then we're no longer upset, right? Feelings, emotions last 90 seconds, done. But our mind perpetuates the story. So I would say, again, calm the mind first. Then what ends up happening once the mind is calm, and that will take practice, that will take time, right? Then one can go into something called open awareness, right? Just seeing the reality all around them. And this will happen seated, and this can happen outside of the cushion. And the point is not, I'm just going to sit on the cushion and be calm and then go out there and be a chaotic mess. No. The point is, how do we bring our moment to moment practice into our moment to moment life, right?
Yes, amen to that, right? The whole purpose of it is to literally shift our consciousness that we're living in our daily life. It wasn't meant to just stay on a pillow and have an experience and then go out and be the same person we used to be.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
that's contracted. That we're like so contracted at that point, right? Even if we are like, oh, but my body is so relaxed, but the inside is like shoulders up to the sky, head down, right? Heart caved in, tense. And later we have physical problems. There's an author, Carol Truman. She wrote Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And in that book, she talks about how cancer, for example, is just anger that's been buried so deeply for such a long time that it turned into disease, and that disease escalated more and more and more and turned into cancer. I don't know the science behind that. I'm not claiming that's true or real, but I am claiming that that is something maybe worth examining within oneself. When you're upset, do you then feel pain in your body? When you're super upset, do you get sick?
And let's face it, almost all the diseases in science have been linked to stress. And what is stress? When you look at what stress really is, it is all of these tensions that we have that are creating what most people call negative emotions. Of course, all emotions are helpful. So there's not really like a negative emotion. We just don't maybe enjoy the feeling of it. But when we're experiencing these emotions that don't feel good, if we bury it, like you said, it's just going to create all this inflammation in the body, lead to all these different diseases. And no wonder people are, they try to avoid these emotions, but no wonder the path forward to healing is, like you said, face it straight on. Look at it, with awareness. It's amazing how it will fade if we have that awareness. Without judgment, it will come and it will go, but we prolong it, as you said, with our stories. I would love to hear more, I love your description about the meditations. I love how you're describing for our viewers, some of the various kinds of meditations that can be done. And like you said, first we have to still the mind. So perhaps you can continue talking about this, and after one learns perhaps to still the mind, what are some of the spiritual experiences that you see people have, or maybe you can share a few of your own?
So clarify, not still the mind, calm the mind, right? The mind can never fully be still, I would say, unless one is like,
Clarification. Yes.
yeah, unless one maybe has practiced for a very, very long time, like the great masters, perhaps. But I think us normal people should not think, I'm going to still my mind, because then we're going to be so anxious. We're going to be like, oh, my mind keeps talking. What's going on? Right? Or what ends up happening. Have you ever meditated, Valerie? And then what? And then you have this peaceful experience, and then your mind goes, that's so peaceful. Done. The experience is gone.
Yes. Just like waking up from a dream. You have this dream and you wake up gone.
Yeah, exactly.
In a moment.
Yeah. So whatever happens when we practice, like when we're focusing on our object of meditation, in this, I'm going to use the breath because that's the practice that I have been taught and trained with. Mm-hmm. So when we focus on the breath, for example, when the mind decides to tell us stories, and the mind will create the best idea, the world-changing idea that's going to impact everyone, and you're going to be, the number one person in the world because of this idea, right? That's how the mind is going to program it. It's not real, right? When the mind tells you the solutions or seeming solutions, we consider that also as not real. Because if it's real, what ends up happening, if you come back to your breath over and over and over again, if it's real, it'll come back after the meditation later. But if you linger onto it, attached to it, ask yourself, why is this any different than the other millions of thoughts I have every moment? Because those billion-dollar ideas happen a million times a day, a billion times a day, and they get us nowhere because that's not the reality that we need. It's distraction, because it's easier to look out there than look in here. It's easier to point the finger, it's her fault, right? Than to be like, oh.
Yes, and maybe as we're going on, we might want to define for the viewers our use of the word real.
Yeah. I would say real as in just reality. Just seeing the reality beyond our thoughts or conceptions or even our own beliefs, right? Now, I cannot tell you what your reality is. I cannot tell you what reality is because everyone has to experience that themselves. And I'm still learning, right? Like I'm still trying my best to practice, still trying to get beyond this like veil of illusion, beyond this box that I have been placed in since I was born, let's just say, right? Because when we're born, we're conditioned to be a certain way. And many of us rebel, many of us go in different directions, but that rebellion is still within that same box, right? But how do we actually open the lid? How do we actually get out, not jump out into another box that's bigger and wider and more spacious, but get out of the box and see what's above all of that. When we can see that, we look down, right? Like we become this observing self, right? Like consciousness observing itself almost.
Yeah. It is, right? And these can lead into deeper types of experiences. Perhaps you might want to elaborate.
Again, yes, I think what ends up happening, people tell us that we should be experiencing this, or after a while, we're going to be experiencing X, Y, and Z, right? Like, so I hear nowadays people are doing jhana labs, like the jhana meditations, and they're making labs, and that they're saying, oh, I can make you go into these states where you don't have any feelings, any thoughts, and you see, and you're in this emptiness, right? And I would say that's another delusion there. You naturally go into the higher states of being literally based on the fundamental practices. So if you don't know how to walk, how are you going to know how to run? But if someone's like, teach me how to run, but they don't know how to walk yet, I cannot teach you how to run because you don't know how to walk.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, so I think those questions, it's a really good question. And I think that our society would benefit a lot from moving away from, well, what's next? What's going to happen if I do this? What's going to happen as you see reality? Well, what's reality? The reality is what you will know when you see it. Because if I tell you, you're going to be deluded even more because I'm still learning, because it's unfolding moment by moment, right? And you do a lot of work with the quantum field and like quantum psychology, Valerie. So you know this. There's no fixed quantum box.
Well, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because even in quantum science, it's pointing to the idea that reality is related and relative. That's what the theory of relativity is all about. It's relative to an observer reference frame. And so whether it's relative to the speed of light or relative to one another, our realities are relative to our own state of consciousness at the time. So no wonder we can either call them all real or we can call them all unreal. But in a way, there's a similarity to these layers of reality. And like you said, it's if someone else defines it for us, we will always be disappointed and we will always be searching for something. I think science has been able to show us that no two people have the exact same experience. A subjective experience is impossible for anybody else to experience. So whether it's the physicist Federico Fagin, who had his own spiritually transformative experiences, and he's gone on to have new theories. I really recommend his book Irreducible. And he theorizes about seities as these units of consciousness that keep growing into increasingly group consciousness, if you will. But he just keeps stressing the fact that none of us share the exact same experience. It's something that's not shareable, if you will. So like you said, everybody has to be able to appreciate where they're coming from. They need to honor their own personal experience. And so that kind of comes back to what you were talking about, how most of us are going around, oh, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not perfect enough. And then therefore we're encumbered with these emotions of shames and guilts and what have you, and we hide from ourselves, and then we try to become someone we're not, and that just takes us further and further away from the feelings that we truly desire. Because what we truly, I think, are usually seeking, like you said, is that inner calm, that inner peace. But oh, the joy that comes from feeling that you're completely authentic in this moment, and that exactly who you are is exactly what is needed for that person or for that situation or for that solution. To me, there is really no greater ecstasy. And I've had ecstatic transpersonal experiences, but authenticity, to your point, really, really coming in alignment with that deep, authentic self. I mean, that is huge.
Yeah, and authenticity, I would add to that. It doesn't mean someone, for example, is very upset that they're going to go around and they're going to be pissed off at every single person and reactive. That's not authenticity. Authenticity is deeper than that, right? Because of course, let's face it, everyone has a different way to show up with different people. That doesn't mean they're inauthentic with other people, right? But the way when you go to your room after this and you close the door and you're alone, your mind is different than when you're with me, right? That's reality.
And that's
But
relativity too, right? That's related to the environment, related to the observer frame, related to the people. Like you said, we're all different in each moment.
yeah. And then when we look at reality, so you're saying like relative reality, right? In like Buddhist cosmology, we have relative and ultimate truth, right? Relatively, I have a teacup here. Inside of it is tea. But one day, what if I want to put soup here? Is it a bowl?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, a good description of relative truth. And I'm so glad that you brought up the thoughts that you did about authenticity, because like you said, if someone doesn't even know how to control their emotions, like I remember when I was first starting in the field of psychology, I really wanted to work with the little kids in juvenile justice and in child welfare. And they were so physically focused that the emotions were like wild horses. I mean, the emotions were all over the place and what have you. And their evolutionary next step probably would have been to cultivate more of a mind, to learn how to think more, and to learn how to use the mind in a way to corral appropriately the emotions, not to bury them, but to corral them appropriately. And we would call that ego development. And later, where most people watching this are probably more developed egos. We know our physiology, we know our emotional landscape, we know our thoughts, but at the same time, like you said, it's usually dancing is more of a persona, and we need to kind of go further. We need to figure out who we are, in a way, like you said, the ultimate truth, who we are beyond all of what we see in the daily life. Like there's something consistent that depending on your belief system, but we have a lot more research on past life research. And if we go with that research, which if I just touch on that a little bit, there's serious researchers, University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies, Ian Stevenson, and he would take this very seriously. The reports of very, very young children who would know things that there's no way that they should have been able to know and to talk about. And he would go verify, oh, yes, there was that person. Oh, yes, they did die like that. And he would even notice that they came into this life with birthmarks that actually were indicative of how they died in the past life. Like, let's say where they had a gunshot wound that was fatal, now they came in with a birthmark. So that too, that whole line of research brings in the idea of we have a transcendent self. We have a consciousness that exists beyond all of this relative physical reality that exists here. So like you said, bringing it back to authenticity, what is that? We just might have these certain traits, these certain characteristics, these certain essences that are really us. There might be themes. I know I've had some of the strangest dreams sometimes that feel very different from unconscious kinds of dreams. And I call them spiritual dreams because they seem to always take me into a reality that, you know, that exists beyond. And I've experienced what feel like our past lives. I remember one of them, I woke up and I was still like having to process that for quite a while, because I woke up that I had been an 18th century Frenchman. And so that's the life that I was in within that dream. But as the 18th century Frenchman, he had just awakened from a dream that he was Cornelius Valerius. And that name was very specific. And it was as if he had written it on a file, like the equivalent of a file on his desk. And the name was so vivid. I woke up and I'm like, what? Well, that was specific. And I Googled and I'm like, was there such a person as a Cornelius Valerius? And I found out indeed there was. And this was he had lived in the 1500s, and he basically wrote a lot about ethics and morality and, you know, things that, you know, we are interested in psychology. And he had the interest in the cosmology, and he had an interest in things that I'm like, oh my God, the same themes, you know, I'm coming in with. So like you said, there just might be this consciousness that is closer to that ultimate, you know, that reality that exists more permanently compared to the reality that is here and physical, which is all impermanent, as we know. So I love about this authenticity. To me, it's getting to those core root essences of who we are, and we can discern which of those to share in any given situation with any given person. That's not about being inauthentic. That's about having discernment. And at the same time, what it's not is, you know, being someone that we're not, being someone that doesn't even match us. If someone says, oh, I love margaritas, and we absolutely hate them, and next thing you know, we're like, oh, I like margaritas too. Well, that's not authentic. You know, it would be more authentic to say I'm not really crazy about margaritas, or not even say anything at all, right? But look at how many people in our society today are suffering and are miserable, because if our societal culture right now is mostly about drinking and partying and having sensory pleasures in that way, like you said, various drugs or what have you, and we all decide that that's what's popular, so we're going to go do it too, it just takes us further and further and further away from what you and I are talking about, that deep, authentic self. Any thoughts about any of that?
Yeah, I think this is why it's so important not to wait until the deathbed to begin to practice. You know, most people are on the deathbed and they have regrets, right? I mean, how many people And I don't mean it disrespectfully. I respect every single individual, but genuinely looking at the reality, right? Reality. How many people are laying there knowing they're about to die and regretting so much of what they did or didn't do? Most of their regrets are how we treat people, how we show up in the world, right? Most of the regrets are not, oh, well, I wish I smiled more. Maybe, but why didn't you smile more? Like, it's not hard to smile, right? But why waste time with the party, right? Why waste time with the momentary pleasures that bring about no positive long term results, right? So when we practice earlier in life, we get to know who we are. Practice, meaning in this case, some kind of contemplative practice, right? For me, I always choose meditation. For other people, maybe chanting. For other people, maybe yoga, yogasana, right? Yoga posture practices
Mm-hmm.
in the West, right? And now I'm talking strictly for the Western side. Other people, something else. Reflect. Are psychedelics a contemplative practice? Because contemplative practice is supposed to get you to reality. And it's supposed to be what you can take with you moment to moment. Now, do a psychedelic. 1 year later, are you still having the experience? Okay, you have a memory of it. But do you actually have the result of that experience last, right? I have friends who they they go on psychedelic journeys and they say they become so happy. But then a week later, they become so depressed again, you know? Now, let's back up a little further. With meditation, it's not like just meditate and then you're going to know all the answers. There's more than that. Traditionally, we have a saying in Vietnamese, it goes something like Van Thu Thu, which means first we hear the teachings or we read or something, right? Like, so you read a book, you get inspired. You hear a podcast, you get inspired. You hear someone speaking, you see someone, you become inspired. Okay, got it. Now I'm going to reflect. How does this connect to my life? How do I want to show up in the world? Then I'm going to go and practice, right? So, example from my own life. In the past, before I ordained, I was in the movie industry and I was a model. And I lived the life that many people say is the quote unquote dream life. That led me to so much suffering I can't even begin to express, right? And I watched people be peaceful and be happy. None of that connected. In my life, I saw spiritual practice my whole life. I got distracted, as we all do, right? By the way of the world. Got distracted by the ideals that people place into our minds. And I fell into that trap. And I realized it wasn't the happiness that I searched for. And I kept searching for this happiness. Now, for me, since I was 15 years old, I was like, I'm going to go be a monk one day and live in a cave. Anyway, became a nun, Buddhist monk, like female monk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And learned that actually there's no living in a cave in the modern world. No, because it's so selfish. And we already have enough selfishness in society. So for me, it's like I practice first to calm my mind. Second, know who I am, right? I'm giving kind of the step here. Next, so then I can know and understand others. When I can know and understand others, because I know and understand myself, I can have kindness and compassion toward others when things happen that are maybe difficult to bear, right? Or difficult to see. I'm like, okay, because we're all so deluded in our own imaginations, right? Our own thoughts of what's happiness. It's not happiness often, right? And because of that, then I can come out into the world and maybe do something that's beneficial rather than prolonging the harm and the suffering, right? But our past is so important. Like, I have no regret at all, right? Like, I'm not like, oh, I wish I didn't go into that world that I was in before. I don't think that at all because that world taught me everything I need to know for right now so that I can see human beings and feel genuine love for every single being, even if I don't agree with them, even if they want to argue with me, even if they want to say, I hate you, Sucandra. Okay, no problem, because everything is just a projection of our own experience. Right? Again, this is why we practice. See reality, see ourselves, see others. I know myself, I will know you. Right? You know yourself, you will know Bob, right? For example.
And like you said, no regrets, because all of our experiences add to our knowing, and it just helps us know others. I would love, in the time we have left, to maybe help the viewers understand, how is some of this linked into science nowadays? Like where are we in finding evidence-based kind of practices when it comes to meditation and other of these?
Yeah, so from my understanding, we can see neuroscience, for example. We have the neural pathways in the brain, right? And every single experience, every word we hear literally shapes our brain. We see that through the MRI scans. We see that through a lot of the different various testing that they have done. I'm not proficient in the lab of neuroscience, right? But we can find that data online. Google Scholar, very quick, even. Right. So if every single momentary, moment by moment, breath by breath experience influences our brain, why not be more careful? What am I paying attention to? Not just my attention with my eyes, not just my attention with what I choose to smell if I have a choice, right? With scent, not just my attention of my choice of experience, but my choice of what I think, because even our thoughts are reshaping our brains. So, example, I wake up in the morning. Am I going to take a moment, pause, really, really wake up my mind, think, oh, what am I going to do for today? How am I going to show up today? What are my intentions for today? Or am I going to go on Instagram, scroll through the feed for an hour, get up, drowsy, have breakfast, and then go about my day? That's setting a different tone. And each thing we do becomes a habit eventually, right? Scrolling. What did they call it? Dead scrolling, not dead scrolling. Valerie, what's the N word now for that?
Oh, yeah, I don't even know.
Something that basically people become, in a way, like zombies, right? To the social medias.
Zombie scrolling would be an excellent title in my mind.
Yeah.
It is like zombie scrolling, right? They're not doing it with much thought. It's just out of habit.
Yeah.
And a lot of time wasting, like you said, rather than purposeful, chosen use of time.
Yeah. And again, imprints in the brain happening here. If imprints are happening in the brain, so we have neurons in the brain. Neurons, they say that fire together, wire together, right? Most common phrase we hear in science, I think. Yeah. Even in any academic world, right? So neurons are not only in the brain, but they're also in the cells of our body. So if neurons that fire together, wire together in the brain, and they reshape our brain, then what's happening in the body? In the other part of the body, right? The rest of the body. Are we manifesting health and longevity? Are we manifesting disease, ailment, pain, suffering? Again, even if we don't see it now, but later. So we have no data on how to cure degenerative disorders. Okay. But how did they come about? That's what we're beginning to only now learn in science. Right?
Well, and I love that because, Western psychology still doesn't really acknowledge a mind-body connection, right? They mostly think that that's illusion, because another word for that would also be psi, or, psychokinesis, if you will, like the ability for the mind to move objects. Well, if we're going to have a mind-body connection, then the mind should have an influence on the body. The mind should have influence on matter. Mind isn't physical, so how can something non-physical have an effect on physical? And yet we have so much data on psychokinesis and all of these different things. Maybe we haven't scientifically studied energy healing quite enough in that way, but the data is really accumulating. And like you said, it kind of starts in neuroscience. And there's not a client of mine that hasn't heard the word neuroplasticity, because I love telling my clients about exactly what you're bringing up. The fact that the data that we have shows that every thought we think is leading to a restructuring of the nervous system. And like you said, the nervous system isn't just the brain, it's the entire nervous system. And nerves are running throughout our body everywhere, giving electrical signals as they're communicating, which are then leading to the chemical cascades. And yet psychology is over relying on the discussion of the chemical cascades when it's the energy signals that are happening that lead to the cascades. And so, like you said, people are kind of reluctant into how do we more deeply study this energy? How do we deeply study how energy healing is working? And obviously there's some limitation in our devices, that hopefully as things improve, we'll be able to get more study. But there is no question, we have shown and demonstrated repeatedly neuroplasticity, and the fact that every thought we think is reflected differently in the mind. And so to me, that right there is showing that mind has effect on body. And if mind has an effect on body, without question, why not use the mind to affect the body positively? And like you said, we know that stressful, not calming thinking of any kind is what leads to inflammation and disease in the body. So why don't we cultivate a more, like you said, meditative practice, contemplative practice, to where we learn how to calm? And I'm glad you differentiated it from still, to where we don't worry about completely stilling the mind. We're calming the mind. We're knowing how to consciously generate, like you said, just the slightest smile helps shift our emotions. There's like a two-way arrow kind of thing happening, where mind and emotions can affect our physiology. But if we just change our physiology, like put a smile on our face, it is amazing how that too creates shifts. So there's many, many pathways to peace, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say really important to remember the mind's nature is to wander. Its nature is to roam. Okay. So you know that. And then what ends up happening through practice, you create more space between thoughts. And now what happens in that void? Then we can begin to understand transpersonal a little bit more.
Yes, because like you said, when we have that space, then that's when we kind of have even deeper experiences. Sucandra, I've so enjoyed our conversation today. Are there any last words, last thoughts that you want to leave our viewers with?
Thank you, Valerie. I also enjoyed our conversation. The only thing I would say to anyone who's listening or watching this is to not take anything at face value. Really reflect on it in your life. Think, right? Use this powerful tool of the mind that you have. Think, not overthink. Don't go extreme, right? But just think, reflect, contemplate. Have reflexivity in your life, not regret. And try to practice to be a good person. Because in the world, I think that's what's needed right now. Just more happy people. And we can be that. Don't rely on the conditions out there. But all the conditions you need to be happy is here. In the mind, the heart. And that is all I would say.
I love that. That's absolutely so beautiful. And if someone is interested in learning more about the Institute or what have you, any information that you want to give as far as contact information?
Sure. You can go to our website, chunghonginstitute.org, or we just opened up a lab mindbraincontemplative.lab.org or mindbrainlab.org. And then it'll all take us to the same place, Chung Huong Institute.
Oh, beautiful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Valerie.